All right, so welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today we are looking at SpaceX, and those folks who always seem to be making headlines, usually because something exploded.
Yeah.
That is exactly where we are starting today, with the aftermath of Starship's 8th test flight. It was a pretty dramatic event, had people talking, especially after this recent article that came out in El Español, a Spanish news site, that really got into the nitty-gritty of what happened.
Yeah, it is fascinating how SpaceX has really embraced almost like a different philosophy when it comes to space travel.
Yeah.
Almost a trial by fire approach, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely not the way NASA used to do things.
Right.
So for those who might not be totally up to speed, remind us about the Starship program. What's the big deal, and why should we care about a rocket blowing up over the ocean?
Well, Starship is designed to be a fully reusable spacecraft, so something that could revolutionize space travel by significantly reducing costs. SpaceX wants to use it for everything from point-to-point travel here on Earth to eventually sending, crewed missions to Mars.
Okay. So pretty ambitious stuff.
Yeah.
And this 8th test flight was supposed to get them closer to those goals.
Exactly. Yeah. This flight had several key objectives, some of which they'd missed on previous tests.
Okay.
They were looking at the performance of a redesigned flap system meant to handle the intense heat of reentry. They were testing new heat shield materials and even experimenting with increased propellant volume for longer flights. Plus, this was their first attempt at deploying satellites in Starship. They had 4 Starlink satellite mock-ups on board.
Wow, that's a lot riding on one flight. So walk us through what happened.
Well, the launch itself from Boca Chica, Texas, seemed to go off without a hitch. In fact, they managed to land the Super Heavy booster using their Mechazilla system. That's their giant robotic arm that catches the booster.
Right.
For the 3rd successful time.
3 for 3. That's got to be a good sign, right?
It is. Yeah, that reusability aspect is critical for their long-term plans.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, things took a turn with the Starship upper stage.
Okay.
Multiple engine failures led to an erratic flight path. And eventually, SpaceX confirmed the loss of signal and a rapid, unscheduled disassembly.
Let me guess that's SpaceX speak for kaboom.
Pretty much, yeah. The Starship exploded. And this isn't even the first time a Starship test has ended this way. The 7th test flight also resulted in a mid-air explosion over the Caribbean.
Wait, so they've blown up 2 Starships over the Caribbean?
Yes, which brings up some very real concerns.
Yeah.
After the 7th test, an Iberia airliner had to declare an emergency due to fuel concerns while waiting for the airspace to clear. And we saw something similar this time. Flight Radar 24 data shows that multiple aircraft had to be rerouted over the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands because of the explosion.
Wow.
These incidents show that there are, real-world consequences to these tests, even for those of us who aren't directly involved in space travel.
So this go big or go home approach is starting to affect other people, not just SpaceX.
Yeah.
That definitely adds a new layer of complexity to the whole thing. But, and I know this might sound crazy, some folks might say these explosions are all part of the plan.
It's true that SpaceX has a very different approach compared to, say, NASA.
Right.
Which has, historically taken a much more risk-averse stance. SpaceX operates on this principle of iterative design. We fly to learn, and we are learning a lot, as they've said themselves.
So they're basically saying that it's okay for their rockets to explode because they learn something from each failure.
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that.
Okay.
They're gathering invaluable data from each test, even the ones that ended in explosions. They analyze what went wrong, why it went wrong, and use that information to refine their designs and procedures. Think of it like this. Each test flight is an experiment. Some experiments yield the desired results, and some, blow up in your face.
Right.
But even the explosive ones can provide valuable data.
Okay, that makes sense. So what exactly did they learn from this particular kaboom?
Plenty, I suspect. Remember those redesigned flaps they were testing?
Yeah.
This flight pushed them to their limits.
Yeah.
Providing data on how they perform under extreme stress. Same goes for the new heat shield materials. They got a real-world trial by fire, literally. And even though the satellite deployment didn't go as planned, SpaceX still gathered information about the separation mechanisms and the dynamics of releasing payloads from Starship.
So it's not just about learning from the mistakes, it's about squeezing every drop of knowledge out of each test, no matter the outcome.
Right.
But this explosion also raised some eyebrows about the whole move fast and break things mentality. Some folks are saying SpaceX might be pushing too hard too fast, especially with their ambitions for crewed missions. What do you think? Is this approach sustainable in the long run?
It's a valid concern, and there's definitely a balance to be struck. Space travel is inherently risky, and no amount of testing can eliminate all risk.
Right.
But I think it's important to remember that SpaceX isn't just, launching rockets willy-nilly.
Mm-hmm.
They have engineers meticulously poring over data from every test, constantly refining their designs and procedures.
So they're not just blowing things up for the fun of it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. They have a long-term vision, and they're willing to iterate and adapt based on what they learn. And keep in mind, this approach has yielded some pretty impressive results. Look at their Falcon 9 rocket. It's become the workhorse of the commercial space industry, thanks in part to their iterative design process.
That's a good point. They've definitely proven that they can make things work.
Yeah.
But this latest Starship explosion does feel different. Maybe it's because it happened over the Caribbean again, or maybe it's because they've been talking a lot about using Starship to launch their Starlink satellites.
You're right. The stakes do seem higher with Starship.
Yeah.
It's not just about launching payloads into orbit. It's about creating an entirely new infrastructure for space travel, one that could potentially change the way we live and work.
Speaking of Starlink, I'm curious to hear more about how it fits into the whole Starship picture.
Well, SpaceX envisions Starship as the vehicle that will rapidly deploy their Starlink satellite constellation,
Okay.
creating a space-based internet infrastructure that could provide global coverage.
So even though this 8th test flight ended with a bang, it was still a crucial step towards realizing that vision.
Yes.
They were testing those satellite deployment mechanisms, right?
Exactly. And even though it wasn't a picture-perfect test, they gathered valuable data that they can use to refine their systems. It's all part of the process, the long game they're playing.
But let's be real, these explosions, even if they are part of the process, are pretty dramatic. It's hard not to see them as setbacks. Does this latest explosion change the timeline for Starlink, for their overall ambitions?
It's too early to say for sure, but any delay is significant.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt that these incidents raise questions, not just about the technical feasibility of Starship, but also about the ethical implications of this kind of risk-taking.
That's a point I wanted to touch on. This fail fast, fail often approach might work in Silicon Valley, but is it appropriate when you're talking about space travel, about potentially putting human lives at risk?
That's a critical discussion to have, and one that will only become more important as we venture further into space. The balance between pushing boundaries and ensuring safety is delicate, and there are no easy answers.
Right.
But these are questions we need to grapple with as a society as we enter this new era of space exploration.
So what does this all mean for the future of Starship? Is this just a bump in the road, or is it a sign that SpaceX might need to reevaluate their approach?
I think it's important to remember that space exploration has always been about pushing limits, about taking risks. Setbacks are inevitable, but the goal is to learn from them and to keep moving forward.
Right.
SpaceX has shown remarkable resilience and innovation in the past, and I wouldn't count them out just yet.
So maybe those explosions, as dramatic as they are just part of the growing pains of a truly revolutionary program.
It's certainly a possibility. After all, some of the greatest leaps forward in human history have come from those who are willing to defy convention, to embrace risk, and to push the boundaries of what's possible.
Speaking of pushing boundaries, one of the things that makes SpaceX so fascinating is their founder, Elon Musk.
Right.
He's a polarizing figure, to say the least, but you can't deny his impact on the space industry. What are your thoughts on his role in all of this?
He's undeniably a visionary. He's managed to capture the public's imagination to make space exploration cool again. And he's certainly not afraid to think big and set ambitious goals. Whether he can achieve those goals, well, that remains to be seen.
And that's what makes it so compelling, right? We're witnessing something truly groundbreaking, and the outcome is uncertain. It's like watching a high-stakes game unfold in real time.
It is, and it's not just about rockets and satellites. It's about human ambition, about our drive to explore and to push beyond our limits.
But some might say his ambitions are a bit too grand, that he's over-promising and under-delivering. What's your take on that?
there's no denying that Musk has a tendency to set aggressive timelines. And those timelines don't always pan out.
Right.
But I think it's important to remember that he's also driving innovation and pushing the boundaries of what's considered possible.
It's like he's challenging the status quo, forcing the industry to adapt and evolve.
Exactly. And whether he achieves all of his goals or not, he's certainly shaken things up and sparked a renewed interest in space exploration.
So even a Starship isn't ready to take us to Mars tomorrow. The work that SpaceX is doing is paving the way for a future where space travel is more accessible, more ambitious, and perhaps even more commonplace.
Absolutely, and that's something worth getting excited about.
You know, it's funny. We started this deep dive talking about a rocket blowing up, and somehow we've ended up talking about the future of humanity.
That's the thing about space exploration. It has a way of broadening our perspective,
Right.
of making us think about the bigger picture.
It forces us to ask big questions, like where do we go from here? What's our place in the universe? What's possible?
And those are questions that don't have easy answers.
Right.
But the pursuit of those answers, the journey of exploration, that's what makes it all so fascinating.
And that journey is filled with both triumphs and setbacks, with moments of awe-inspiring beauty and moments of explosive drama.
And through it all, we learn, we grow, and we inch ever closer to understanding the vastness of the cosmos and our place within it.
Well said. So even though this latest Starship test might not have gone exactly as planned, it's another chapter in that ongoing story, a story that's still being written.
And I, for one, can't wait to see what happens next.
It really does feel like we're on the cusp of something monumental, doesn't it? This shift from government-led space exploration to more private companies like SpaceX taking the reins.
It's an interesting dynamic and one that's opening up all sorts of possibilities.
Yeah.
Private companies bring a different perspective, a different set of motivations, and often a willingness to take risks that government agencies might shy away from.
And SpaceX isn't the only player in this new space race. You have companies like Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic also making waves. It feels like this healthy competition is pushing everyone to innovate and to push the boundaries even further.
It's definitely creating a more dynamic and exciting landscape.
Yeah.
And this influx of private investment is driving down the cost of access to space, which could have a ripple effect on all sorts of industries, from telecommunications to research to even tourism.
Space tourism. Imagine that, taking a weekend trip to orbit.
Right.
It's wild to think that might become a reality in our lifetimes.
But beyond the potential economic benefits, there's also a deeper philosophical aspect to space exploration, isn't there?
Absolutely. It forces us to confront our place in the universe, to grapple with the vastness of space and the fragility of our own planet.
It challenges us to think about the long-term survival of humanity and to consider what kind of future we want to create.
You know, it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day here on Earth and forget that there's a whole universe out there waiting to be explored. And these companies, these individuals who are daring to dream big and to push the limits of what's possible, they're reminding us of that.
Right.
They're reigniting that sense of wonder and possibility that's so essential to the human spirit.
It's that spirit of exploration, that drive to push beyond our limits, that has always propelled humanity forward.
Yeah.
And space exploration is the ultimate expression of that spirit. It's about pushing the boundaries of knowledge, of technology, and of our own understanding of what it means to be human.
It's a journey filled with challenges, with setbacks, with risks, but it's also a journey filled with wonder, with discovery, with the potential to change the course of history.
And even when things go wrong, even when rockets explode, we learn something. We adapt, we innovate, and we keep pushing forward. Because the pursuit of knowledge, the desire to explore the unknown, that's something worth striving for.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the biggest takeaway for me is this. Space exploration is more than just rockets and technology. It's a reflection of who we are, of our potential, and of our collective desire to reach for something beyond ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. It's about pushing the limits of what's possible, and in the process, discovering what it truly means to be human.
So to all of you listening out there, keep looking up at the stars, keep asking questions, keep dreaming big, because the future is out there waiting to be explored.
And who knows, maybe one day you'll be the one pushing those boundaries, making those discoveries, and shaping the future of space exploration.
And on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of SpaceX and Starship. It's been a fascinating conversation, and we hope you've learned something new along the way.
Until next time, keep exploring.
And stay curious.